In this video we will walk you through the process of contract initialization by the project manager. A contract will be passed from pre-construction to construction in the transition to construction process. Then the construction division and district contract manager initialization is done and the activation of contract occurs before the project manager initialization occurs. The project manager receives a notification email stating that the contract has been activated and is ready to use. Make sure you are using the project manager role by clicking on the down arrow attached to the Home button. To review a contract, navigate to the Contract Administration under the Construction component. Enter the contract in the search criteria. Click the contract link, in blue, for the contract ID. Verify the contract ID field is correct based on the contract, contractor's name, and district. Verify all the contract fields. You can click on any of the navigation tabs to verify contract information. Now let us look at the contract projects associated with the contract. Click on the project's quick link in blue on the top of the screen. This shows us a list of projects for this contract. Select a project from the list. Verify all the project fields. You can click on any of the navigation tabs to verify contract project information. This way you can review all projects on the contract. To review contract project items, navigate to the Items quick link and then click on Contract Project Items tab. Review the items on the screens to match the items on the contract. Repeat this for all contract project items. You can do this by clicking on the project's quick link on the top. This particular contract has only one contract project associated to it. Now let's look into contract times. Click on the Administration Overview quick link on the top. Select the contract. Click on the Contract Times tab. To verify and add site time records to the contract, navigate to the Contract Times tab and under the Site Time section verify there is only one site time record 00DT or 01DT. Verify that the time description field matches the contract completion date. Click on the Time ID link for the main contract time. On the General tab, verify the original completion date field shows the original completion date for the contract time. If this doesn't match the contract, contact the pre-construction staff to correct and retransition the contract. Now to add unit and date information to a site time record, click on the Units and Dates tab. Verify that the original completion field and the current completion field matches the contract. Please correct if it doesn't match the contract. Also verify the time units field is days and click Save. If you wish to add rate and cap information to a site time record, click the Rates and Cap Amounts tab. Verify the liquidated damages rate field. Enter the amount to be charged per day that the contractor exceeds the allowed time for a contract time record. Verify the liquidated damages unit field is days. If not, click the drop-down arrow and select days. In the liquidated damages cap amount field, enter the maximum liquidated damages or disincentive amount that can be withheld from the contractor for this time record if it is specified in the contract. Click the Save button. Now let's go back to the Contract Times tab in Contract Administration component to look at the informational times. You can do that by clicking on the previous button. Informational times contain the pertinent dates on a contract. Some dates are automatically created when the contract is transitioned from pre-construction. There are other dates that can be added depending on the type of contract and the stage at which the contract is being administered. To add informational time records to the contract. In the informational section, click the expand arrow to maximize the section. Click on Select the informational time to add dates. Select the dates you would like to add, and enter the required information. In the actual date field, verify/enter the date for the following date types. ADV, which is the advertisement date. Award DT, awarded date. Exec DT, execution date. LETD, letting date. PAJB, price adjustments base date, for fuel and price. NTPDT, notice to proceed date. WKBGNDT, work begin date, if known. In the projected date field, enter the date for ESTC, which is the estimated completion date. In the comments field, enter additional information of the person who initialized the contract in construction division. Click the Save button. Now let us look at maintaining and assigning contract authorities. Click on the Contract Authority tab. Contract Authority works in conjunction with other security features to give users the authority to access and change contract information. The Contract Authority tab contains all the contract authority information that has been recorded for this contract, listed by person. Contract authority will be available for roles higher than inspector. A DCM or PM is able to assign contract authority to the users. To add information on the contract-specific Contract Authority tab. In the Contract-specific Contract Authority section, click the New button. In the Person field, enter the ID of the person for whom you are assigning contract authority. To search, start typing, or place cursor in field and press the Enter key. In the Role field, enter the role of the person for whom you are assigning contract authority. To search, start typing, or place cursor in field and press the Enter key. In the Effective Date field, enter the date the contract authority becomes effective for the person. In the Expiration Date field, enter the date the contract authority ends for the person. In the Status field, click the drop-down arrow and select the status for the record. Review the information closely. Once this record is saved, it cannot be modified. This record would have to be expired and a new record created for changes to occur. Click the Save button. Office-wide Contract Authorities section contains a list of all the office-wide contract authorities in the system that would include this contract, listed by person. The information in this list is view-only and cannot be changed. You can also grant contract authority to multiple users. Navigate to the dashboard by clicking on the Home button. Navigate to contract-specific authorities under the Construction component. Click the Add Users to a Contract button. In the Contract field, click on the field and select the contract. Select Status, Effective Date, and Expiration Date, if applicable. Click the row to select users from the list, or use the Quick Find search box to search for users. The system adds a check mark beside your selection and shades the row. To cancel a selection, click the row again. Click the Add to Contract-Specific Authorities button. Click the Save button. You can also grant multiple contract authorities to a single user by clicking on the Add Contracts to a User button. Click in the User Role field and select the role. Select Status, Effective Date, and Expiration Date, if applicable. Click the row to select multiple contracts from the list or use the Quick Find search box to search for contracts. Click the Add to Contract Specific Authorities button. Then click on Save. This way you can either add multiple users to a contract or add multiple contract to a user. In this video we will walk you through the process of managing vendor assets and associating them to a contract as a project manager. Vendor assets include equipment, personnel types, and supervisor. Each vendor, including the prime contractor and all subcontractors, need to have vendor assets added. Once these are added, they are available to become contract vendor assets. To add assets to a vendor for equipment. From the dashboard, find Vendor Overview section. In the search box, type in the vendor ID or part of the vendor name. Select the vendor by clicking on the vendor ID in the vendor column. Click on the Asset Quick link. On the Equipment tab, click the New button. Enter the equipment ID. Enter the equipment description. Enter the effective date. Click in the Status field and select Active and save. You can also click on the Select Generic Equipment button to select multiple equipments. Enter an effective date, status for the equipment. Click on the equipments you want to select. A check mark appears when a selection is made. Click on Add to Vendor Equipment button. You can add the equipment ID if desired. It is not a required field. Click on Save. Now to add assets to a vendor for personnel types. On the Personnel Role tab, click the New button. Enter the Personnel Role ID. Enter the Personnel Role description. Enter the effective date. Click in the Status field and select Active. You can also click on the Select Generic Personnel Role button to select multiple roles. Enter an effective date, status. Click on the records you want to select. A check mark appears when a selection is made. Click on Add to Vendor Personnel Role button. You can add the Personnel Role ID if desired. It is not a required field. And then click Save. Now to add assets. Vendor for Supervisor. On the Supervisor tab, click the New button. Enter the Supervisor ID. Enter the Supervisor description. Contractor or supervisor names should be entered into this field. Enter the effective date. Click in the Status field and select Active. You can also click on the Select Generic Supervisor button to select multiple supervisors if available. Click Save. The vendor asset summary will contain information about vendor equipment, personnel, and supervisor that can be used in daily work reports. The next step would be to associate these vendor assets to a contract, which we will talk about in the next video. In this video we will show you how to associate the vendor assets to a contract. Once assets are added to the vendor, they are available to be associated as contract vendor assets. Once added as a contract vendor asset, these entries will be available to the daily work report. To associate vendor assets to a contract, on the dashboard navigate to Contract Vendor Assets under the Construction component. Enter the contract ID in the quick search box. The Contract Vendor Asset Overview shows you the number of vendor assets currently recorded for the prime contractor on a contract. Contract vendor assets are the prime contractor's equipment and personnel, in performing the contract work. It also includes the V.staff. This allows user to select the assets that are available on the vendor assets for the contractor and subs associated to the contract. To add contract vendor equipment, click the Row Actions button for the appropriate contract and vendor, and select the Open Equipment action. Click the Select Vendor Equipment button to add from the vendor assets that have been previously populated. In the Effective Date field, enter the date the piece of equipment becomes effective. In the Status field, click the drop-down arrow and select the status of the record. Select Active. Select all the equipment to be associated to the contract. Multiple equipment can be selected. Click the Add to Contract button. To add contract vendor personnel, click on the Contractor Personnel tab. Click on the Select Vendor Personnel Role button to add from the vendor assets that have been previously populated. In the Effective Date field, enter the date the personnel becomes effective. In the Status field, click the drop-down arrow and select the status of the record. Select Active. Select all the personnel to be associated to the contract. Multiple personnel can be selected. Click the Add to Contract button. To add contract vendor supervisors, click the Contractor Supervisor tab. Click on the Select Vendor Supervisor button to add from the vendor assets that have been previously populated. In the Effective Date field, enter the date the supervisor/foreman becomes effective. In the Status field, click the drop-down arrow and select the status of the record. Select Active. Select all the supervisor/foreman to be associated to the contract. Multiple personnel can be selected. Click on Add to Contract button. User can also delete the contract vendor asset by clicking on the Open Row Actions menu on the contract vendor you wish to change and click on Delete. You can do the same to delete equipment or personnel role or supervisor. Click on Save. Now the contract vendor assets will be available for the daily work reports. In this video, we will walk you through the process of creating a daily work report and submitting a daily work report for approval. Daily work reports, DWRs, are created to document the work that is performed daily on a contract. The information recorded in a DWR is based on actual activity and not a planned activity. It is essential for the administration of a contract. Daily information is recorded about the weather, the personnel who worked at the construction site and the equipment used, installed work items, locations, and quantities. Each DWR will be approved on a daily diary, and then included on a payment estimate. To create a daily work report, navigate to Daily Work Report in the Construction component in the dashboard. On the All Daily Work Report Overview component, click the Component Actions button, and choose the Select Contract to add DWR action. Search for and select the contract ID to which to add a DWR. Click the Create DWR on Contract button. In the DWR Date field, enter the date for the DWR or use the calendar to select. This is a required field. In the Inspector field, search for and select the user ID of the inspector associated with this DWR. This is a required field. The default will be the person who is logged on this session. In the weather field, click the drop-down arrow and select the appropriate weather condition. In the rainfall amount field, enter the amount of rainfall recorded for the DWR date, if appropriate. In the low and high temperature fields, enter the temperature recorded for the DWR date. In the Remarks section, in the Type field, click the drop-down arrow and select the appropriate remark type. General is a required remark on all DWRs. The remaining types are optional. Then click on the Save button. To open or edit the DWR that you created, navigate to the All Daily Work Report Overview component by clicking on the Daily Work Reports quick link. Type in the contract ID in the quick search box. Expand the row by clicking on the down arrow. Click on the DWR date link to open the DWR to be edited. Make the required changes and save the DWR. The Save button becomes active only when a change has been made. Now we will look into adding contractors on site, contractor equipment, personnel, supervisor, and foreman. These must have been previously added to the contractor vendor assets records. On the Contract Daily Work Report Summary and click on Contractors on Site tab. Please note that this tab must be completed for any item postings to occur, even if contractor was not on site. If contractor was not on site, enter a 0.00 for hours. Click the Select Contractors button. Search for and select the contractors for this DWR. The prime contractor and any subcontractors added should be available to choose on this list. You can select multiple contractors if they were on site and add all of them at the same time. Click the Add to DWR Contractors button. In the Start Time field, enter the time of day this contractor was first observed on site for this DWR. If you just add the time, the system will automatically default the date to the day of the DWR. In the End Time field, enter the time of day this contractor was last observed on site for this DWR. If you just add the time, the system will automatically default the date to the day of the DWR. In the Hours field, enter the total time the contractor was observed on the construction site on the DWR date. Enter a 0.00 if contractor was not on site but there are item postings required for this DWR. Click the Save button. Now, to add information about the contractor equipment, click the Contractor Equipment tab. Click the Row Actions button for the contractor associated with this DWR, and choose the Select Equipment action. These actions need to be completed for each contractor. Search for and select the appropriate contract vendor equipment ID, S. Click the Add to DWR Contractor Equipment button. In the Number on Site field, enter the number of pieces of the equipment on site on the DWR date. In the Number Used field, enter the number of pieces of the equipment used on site on the DWR date. In the Hours Used field, enter the number of hours the equipment was used on the DWR date. In the Hours Idle field, enter the number of hours the equipment was idle on the DWR date. In the Comments field, enter any additional information about the record. Click the Save button. To add information about the contractor personnel, click the Contractor Personnel Role tab. The personnel must have been previously added to the contractor vendor assets records. For the appropriate contractor, click the Row Actions button, and choose the Select Personnel action. These actions need to be completed for each contractor. Select the personnel records to associate with the DWR. Click the Add to DWR Contractor Personnel button. In the Number on Site field, enter the count of how many of this type of personnel to record on this DWR date for this contractor. In the Total Hours field, enter the total number of hours worked by this person for this DWR contractor on this date. In the Comments field, enter any additional information about the record. Click the Save button. To add information about contractor supervisor or foreman, click the Contractor Supervisor/Foreman tab. For the appropriate contractor, click the Row Actions button, and choose the Select Supervisor/Foreman action. Search for and select staff members to add to the DWR. Click the Add to DWR Contractor Supervisor/Foreman button. In the Number on Site field, enter the count of how many of this type of staff has been added to the DWR for this DWR contractor on this date. In the Total Hours field, enter the total number of hours worked by this person recorded as personnel for this DWR contractor on this date. In the Comments field, enter additional information about the record. Click the Save button. To add information about agency staff, click the VDOT Staff tab. Click the New button. Click in the VDOT Staff field and start typing the name to search. If the VDOT staff doesn't show up in the list, the person must be added as a person into the system. Choose the staff name associated with the DWR. In the Work Code field, enter the agency staff member's work code for the work performed on the DWR date. In the Regular Hours field, enter the number of regular hours worked for the date. In the Overtime Hours field, enter the number of overtime hours worked for the date. In the Vehicle ID field, enter the identification number for the agency staff member's vehicle. In the Starting Mileage field, enter the beginning mileage for the agency staff member's vehicle for the date. In the Ending Mileage field, enter the ending mileage reported for the agency staff member's vehicle for the date. In the Comments field, enter any additional information about the associated record. Click the Save button. Let us look into posting work items to a DWR. Click the Work Item Postings tab. Click the Select Items button. When selecting items to add to the DWR, the items are added with a 0.00 quantity. Click the Expand arrow for the newly added item posting. In the Contractor field, click the drop-down arrow and select the contractor that performed the work for this item posting. In the Quantity Posted field, enter the quantity of the item installed by the contractor on this date. The Units field indicates the type of measurement used to determine the quantity of the reference item. In the Location field, enter the location where the work was performed for the DWR item posting. This is a required field. In the Measure checkbox, check the box if the item is measured for the DWR item posting. In the Materials Set field, click the drop-down and choose the appropriate materials set in which the acceptance criteria will be based upon. When a value is saved in the Material Set field for an item posting, the system automatically creates acceptance records for each material in the material set. Material set is required for all items that have materials acceptance. Items such as labor or dollar-based items do not require material sets. In the Plan Sheet Page Number field, enter the number of the plan sheet page on which this work item is found. In the As-Built Quantity field, enter the placed quantity when the item is complete. In the Schedule Activity Code field, add the code that corresponds to the contractor's schedule for this item. Enter information in the Station From field, Station From Plus field, Offset Type field, Offset Distance field, Station to field, Station to Plus field, Offset Type field and Offset Distance field. Click the location to expand this section. If additional location information needs to be added, click the Save button. You can also add an attention flag on the DWR item posting. Attention flags allow you to place a temporary reminder or comment on a DWR item, much as you would use a sticky note on a paper document. When attention flags are recorded for a DWR item posting, the system shows a yes in the attention flag field in the posting row. Click the Work Item Postings tab. Expand the item posting by clicking the down arrow. Click the Actions menu on the item row on the item posting and select DWR item attention flags. Type in text in the comments field to create an attention flag for this item posting. Click the Save button. A flag icon is shown on the item posting row to show that there is an attention flag. When the reason for the attention flag has been resolved, the attention flag can be deleted. To delete an attention flag, click the Work Item Postings tab. Expand the item posting with the attention flag by clicking the down arrow. Click the Actions menu on the item row on the item posting and select DWR item attention flags. Click on the Open Row Actions menu. Click Delete. Click the Save button. Next we will look into how to submit a DWR for approval. In the Contract Daily Work Report Summary, click on the General tab. Click the Component Actions button, and select the Submit for Approval action. The DWR is now in pending approval status. We can check this by going to the DWR Overview screen by clicking the Daily Work Reports quick link on the top. Find the contract. Click on the drop arrow to see the DWR with the pending status. The DWR will also show up on the diary for review and approval as a pending DWR to be approved. In this video we will walk you through the process of copying a DWR and editing a DWR as a non-creator. To add a DWR on a contract by copying an existing DWR, navigate to Daily Work Reports Overview on the dashboard. Search for and select the contract on which you wish to add a DWR. Expand the contract to see the DWRs on this contract. Find the DWR date that you want to copy. Click on the Open Row Actions menu button. Click on Copy. In the Contract Daily Work Report Summary component, in the DWR date field you will automatically see today's date, but enter the date for the DWR or use the calendar to select the date you want to create for the DWR. Continue to add the fields on the screen including the general remark which is required. The contractor information and agency staff information are copied from the original DWR. Click on Save button. The DWR is added to the contract. You can edit/update information on the General tab or update contractor and subcontractors on site or update contractor equipment supervisor or personnel on the DWR. You can also post items to the DWR. Make sure you save the changes that you made. You can also edit a DWR that was not created by you. But the DWR needs to be in draft status. From the Daily Work Report Overview component in the dashboard, click on the DWR with a different inspector name. You can edit update information on the General tab or update contractor and subcontractors on site or update contractor equipment supervisor or personnel on the DWR. You can also post additional items to a DWR and change a quantity on existing item. Make sure you save any changes that have been made. In this video we will walk you through the process of assigning contractors associated with a force account to the DWR. Log into the AWP system as a project manager or inspector. We will be using the project manager role to demonstrate this functionality. Under the construction component, click on Daily Work Reports. In the All Daily Work Report component, search for and select the contract and select a DWR to add the force account contractors. From the Daily Work Report Summary, select the Force Account Contractors tab. Click the Select Force Accounts button. Search for and select the contractors you want to add. Click the Add to DWR Force Account Contractors button. Click the Save button. This concludes the video for DWR Force Accounts. In this video you learned about assigning force account contractors to a DWR. In this video we will walk you through the process of recording force account contractor information on a DWR. Information must be recorded on the force account contractor summary in order to record force account contractor information on a DWR. Under the construction component, click on Daily Work Reports. In the All Daily Work Report Overview component, search for and select the contract and select a DWR. From the Daily Work Report Summary, click on the Force Account Contractors tab. Click on the Sequence Number link. To record force account contractor equipment information on a DWR. While on the DWR Force Account Contractor Summary, click on the Equipment tab. For the Equipment row, in the STDHRS field, type the number of hours the equipment was used on the DWR date. In the idle HRS field, type the number of hours the equipment was idle on the DWR date. Click the Save button. The Labor tab contains a list of the personnel for whom the force account contractor can submit hourly charges on this DWR. To record force account contractor labor information on a DWR, click the Labor tab. For the Personnel row, in the Reg HRS field, type the number of regular hours worked. In the OT HRS field, type the number of overtime hours worked that require the application of an additional hourly pay rate. In the DBL HRS field, type the number of hours worked that require pay that is double the standard hourly rate. Click the Save button. The Materials tab contains a list of the materials for which the force account contractor can submit charges on this DWR. To record force account contractor material information on a DWR, click the Materials tab. For the Material row, in the Quantity field, type the quantity of material invoiced. Click the Save button. So this way you can record force account contractor information like equipment, labor, and material on a DWR. A daily diary is a collection of all the daily work reports, DWRs, submitted on one day by all inspectors working on a contract. The project manager can only submit one daily diary per day per contract. In the daily diary, the project manager authorizes/approves the DWRs. The system does not allow more than one diary to be created per day per contract, and a diary may not be created for a future date. To add a daily diary, click on Daily Diary under the Construction component. Now, click the Component Actions button, and choose the Select Contract to add Daily Diary action. Search for and select the contract you wish to add a daily diary. Click the Create Daily Diary on Contract button. In the Diary Date field, enter the date documented by the diary. This is a required field. In the Author field, search for and select the user ID and name of the person who authored the daily diary. The user who is logged on is the default. In the Weather field, click the drop-down arrow and select the weather condition for the diary date. Enter the low temperature and high temperature fields. You can leave these blank and later populate from DWRs automatically. In the Comments field, enter any additional information about the record. The Remarks field indicates the number of remarks. This is a required field. In the Remarks section, in the Remarks Type field, click the drop-down arrow and select the remark type. Enter a general type remark for the diary date. Click the Save button. Now let's look into managing and approving DWRs in a daily diary. The DWRs tab on the Contract Daily Diary Summary component contains a list of all the daily work reports currently included in the daily diary. To view or modify the DWRs in a daily diary, click the sequence link to be taken to the DWR. A DWR can be edited only if it in the draft status. View the DWR information, or make adjustments as appropriate and click the Save button. Let's go back to the previous screen. To approve all pending DWRs in a daily diary, click the DWRs tab. Click the Approve Pending DWRs button above the list of DWRs. Click the Save button. This way all the DWRs with a pending approval status can be approved together.